Hey, Dino here. I want to show you how to use Apigee to manage MCP communication. Before I do that, I have some remarks to make to sort of frame where I'm going with this. A topic that we hear basically consistently across different sizes of companies and across industries is how do I operationalize MCP? A lot of the business leaders, business and technical leaders that I speak with treat MCP as a synonym to AI. So they think if I'm pursuing AI, then I need to figure out MCP, need to figure out what this looks like, operationalize it. And a subtext to that topic is, do I need an MCP gateway? Well, my answer to that is yes, you do. But what does it look like? Let's get into the details. So the desire to exploit AI-powered agents is driving strategy and investment, as I said, across different sizes of companies and across different industries. The vision is these AI-powered agents are going to deliver a massive productivity leap for employees and maybe for customers and partners as well. Um, the concept is we have these agents that can plug in and connect to large language models. And if the agent also can plug into tools, the large language model can instruct the agent on when to call these tools and what to call them with in order to accomplish tasks. And we can sort of generalize that beyond just MCP, Model Context Protocol, to also include the agent calling existing enterprise APIs. No need to wrap existing APIs in MCP, and agents calling other agents, delegating tasks or subtasks to other agents in the network. So this is kind of a broad vision for how agents are going to interoperate with different systems, all powered by that LLM. But today I want to focus on just the MCP part of that equation. My thesis is that Apigee provides governance across that portfolio. All of these interactions are going to be network calls, and as such, we can term them APIs. And you want governance and control over those APIs. You want visibility. You want rate limiting metrics, um, observability on all that network traffic. And Apigee can act as that governance layer. But today, let's focus specifically on MCP, on chatbots or agents plugging into remote tools over MCP. These might be remote in your network. That's typical, and what that would look like. Okay, so backing up a little bit, MCP is not the first API. There's lots of different APIs that existed for a long time. REST has been the most popular kind of architectural choice. And it was very simple back in the day to build your own API server. In a simplistic model, the API server itself would directly adjudicate the caller's rights to invoke the endpoints on that API server. And this makes sense when the system is relatively small. But the same kind of idea applies to MCP. MCP is not different in that regard. It is just another API. Unlike REST, which uses the HTTP verb and path for semantic content, a get is different than a post, and different paths mean different things. With MCP, all the semantic content of the call is buried in the payload. So you're going to use HTTP post and always the same path, but the meaning of what you want to accomplish is embedded in that payload. So it's a little bit different than REST in that regard, but it's just an API. And like REST, we can apply a simple or simplistic model where an MCP server directly adjudicates the caller's rights to be able to invoke tools. It authorizes. And again, this makes sense when the system is small, relatively limited. However, as you scale this up, which most enterprises do, you've got lots of different MCP servers, you've got lots of different client applications, a number of different cohorts of users. It's a challenge, a real scalability challenge, to allow that same simplistic model where each MCP server is making authorization decisions on its own for all these different clients. So this is just not a reasonable thing to do in a larger enterprise. And we saw the same thing with REST APIs. MCP doesn't change the dynamics there or the equation. The trade-offs are still the same. You do want a scalable model for managing this. And a good way to do that is just separate concerns. Let the MCP server deliver the capability that it has and introduce a secure proxy that intercedes between clients and servers. This is not different than what you would apply in REST. Again, MCP is just another API. But we can introduce the secure proxy. Clients, rather than calling MCP servers directly, would call the proxy, and the proxy itself can make the decisions to allow or deny requests based on the identity of the caller, the scope maybe attached to the access token in the caller, the thing that the caller is requesting, and maybe other elements too. So you might think of that as attribute-based access control, which you can enforce that in that middle tier, that intermediary. You can kind of extend that idea by attaching externalized access control rules to that secure proxy. So it can be easily updated. Administrators, operators can update these things as new MCP servers get onboarded. You don't need to change the proxy, you just need to change the rules that the proxy can access and enforce. So proxy is the enforcement point. The decisions are stored in this authorization control data store. And this is the same model that applies with REST. It's not different. Now, the way you make those decisions might be slightly different, but it's the same basic model. You don't need to change that. You don't need an MCP-specific gateway in order to get the same level of enterprise-grade governance. Last thing I want to mention is that you're going to want to include your enterprise identity server there so that when users are employing these client applications, they sign in as they normally would with their enterprise sign-in. That access token delivered by the identity provider gets propagated to Apigee or the secure proxy. The secure proxy can, based on those authorization rules, the identity of the caller, what they're asking to do, that secure proxy can make the decision. If it's an allow decision, the secure proxy connects with the upstream MCP server with its own token. And by this, in this manner, we've delegated access control decisions to Apigee, and Apigee is acting as a delegate, as a user delegate when calling that MCP server. Okay, so that's the basic model, and I want to show you what this looks like in actuality. So I'm going to flip over to some code. This is some Python code. It uses the fast MCP framework, very popular to build an MCP server. Super simple. The metaphor that I'm using here is it's a product list and it's a product management MCP tool, MCP server. It's got a couple of different tools. One is to search the products, another to update the product price, and a third to update the product quantity. And it's all stored in a database, and super simple. A couple hundred lines of Python. I think we can run this locally, and what I'd like to do is show you what it looks like to interact with. So it's listening on my local host 9240, and I'm going to bring up MCP Inspector. So this is a kind of standard web app that allows me to connect to MCP servers. I'm going to connect to that endpoint on my local. This MCP server doesn't have prompts or resources, so we're just going to go right into tools and request that we list tools. And those are the three tools that I mentioned: search product, and then update some information on the product. So let's go try the search product. I'm going to type in the word iron as a keyword and then run the tool, and it says, yep, that succeeded. I found 3 products related to iron. One, there's an anvil, there's some iron pellets, and then there's some railroad tracks. Okay, so 3 different items in the product store for that keyword for iron, and I'm just showing you that this MCP server is actually working. The other thing I can do is deploy this to a cloud-based server. So I'm running it locally, yes, but I could also deploy it to Cloud Run, for example, which I have done in Google Cloud here. So let me go to my Cloud Run services, and there is the product service, and I'll get the URL here. I'll just copy that and flip back over to my my MCP inspector, and I'll paste that in. So now I'm using the remote endpoint, no longer using my local host, and I'm going to click connect. So we've connected into that that server. Go back to the tools. You can see the same set of tools: search product, update. If I want to select this product, I'll do the same query. Now we're talking to a remote system. I'll put in iron, run the tool, success. It gives me those same three products. All right, very good. So we now know that this MCP server is running at that endpoint and is accessible in the network. What you have noticed probably is there is no security on this. There's no access control, nothing that looks at the user that's inbound, nothing doing any sort of control over that. And that's by design. What we want to do is delegate that control to a mid-tier gateway, an MCP gateway, if you will. And I've done that as well in this environment with Apigee. So I've introduced into Apigee the MCP access control API proxy, which is just kind of a standard API proxy inside Apigee. It has that one endpoint, the MCP endpoint. But what it does is it looks at the inbound, it insists on having an inbound authorization header, which will contain the access token. That's going to be a JWT in our case. Apigee is going to verify the JWT, set some access control settings, and then call out to that external access control service. If that approves, then Apigee will proxy to the upstream system. If denied, Apigee will send back a 403 saying, you're not authorized to call the thing that you want to call. So very simple. MCP server in Apigee, and we can invoke this directly using any MCP client. Now, I want to show you the access control data store. I've just stored this in a sheet, in a Google Sheet. Really, it's just a table that relates an allow or deny decision to a combination, a tuple. And that would be role, the HTTP verb, and the MCP method. Now, mostly the HTTP verb is going to be post. There is in MCP a requirement to allow a get, a long-standing get on the MCP. So we're going to allow any authorized party to do that. And also, any authorized party is going to be able to call the MCP methods like initialize, tools list, resources list, and so on. This is where the interesting part comes. For my tools call on search product or update product price, we're going to allow those for any user that has a staff role or staff group. And then conversely, for users that have the supplier role, they're going to be able to update the quantity and search the product, but not update the price. Okay, so some differences in what Apigee will allow depending on the identity of the authenticated user. All right, so let's see, how are we going to test this? To test this, what I like to do is use the Google Gemini CLI, which is an MCP client. It's a chatbot. It can manage MCP tools. So we're going to use that, and you'll see me authenticate into as a user as I run that client. So let's flip over to a terminal window and run Gemini. Okay, so I've started up Gemini, and I'll show you the list of MCP servers configured, and it says you have this products server configured, but it's not connected. There's no OAuth. Let me show you the settings for that. That's here. Basically, this is the MCP server that endpoint for hosted by Apigee. There's the client ID and secret that I'm going to use when I sign in with OAuth. But right now it's saying you're not signed in. So how do we sign in? We take an explicit step by saying MCP auth products, and it's going to sign in. So what it's doing is popping open a login window and saying, please sign in. So I'm going to sign in with an example account. And it's saying, yep, we're signing you in. This is your email address. Would you like to grant consent to this app? That's the client ID and secret that I showed you in the OAuth configuration. I'm going to say, yep, allow that. And now just to check my status, what I want to do is refresh this, and it's going to tell me, yep, you're signed in. This is your name. And this is the set of groups that is associated to your user. So as Wilma's a supplier. Remember, why that's relevant is our access control list says suppliers can update the product quantity, but not update the product price. Okay, but can search products. So let's try in Gemini. I know you are a software assistant, but I would like you to help me look through the Acme products list. Can you list the products? Give me all the details. All right, so just an English language prompt. The Gemini CLI will send that up to the Gemini LLM along with the list of tools that it has available. And the LLM is going to say, oh, you want to use this search product tool. I want to do this, maybe it's a casing thing. I want to ask that question in a different way. List the products associated to iron in lowercase. So it's invoked the MCP server, and you can see the three products coming back. So the same thing that we saw in the MCP inspector, the anvil, the iron pellets, and the railroad tracks, with details like a description and a price and a number of available items. So what I want to do is, as Wilma, remember, update the available quantity of anvil items to 5 units. And what we expect is that it's going to call into that same MCP server and say update, and now we have 5 units. Now, suppose I want to try something different. I want to update. By the way, I want to point out something which I should have done. I'm going to start. Oh, I did start a trace session. So you'll see this is Apigee showing you the MCP calls that are being made by Gemini CLI, and then Apigee is proxying them to that upstream target. So here's the first call we see coming in, and it's basically saying the MCP server client is saying initialize. And then there's a notification, probably it's saying, yep, I'm initialized. And then, and so on, the additional calls. This one is saying, give me all the prompts, give me the tools, and so on. So Apigee is proxying all those to the upstream after going through its verification steps that I described to you, which would be verifying the inbound JWT, and you should be able to see when that verification happens. You'll see that the The payload is there. The signature has been validated. There are the scopes and so on. And then in the access token, there's the group. There's the supplier group associated to Wilma. So all of that is being verified by Apigee. And here in this step is where Apigee is calling to that external access control service that is reading the data that I showed you here to make its authorization decision. And if the authorization decision is yep, that's allowed, then it propagates to the upstream, or proxies to the upstream. Okay, so now let's try update the price for the anvil to, let's see, the existing price is 50.23. Let's make it 54.50. So we're going to make that call. The LLM is going to say, oh, you want to call the update product price tool. And what's going to happen is that call will be sent to Apigee. Apigee will look at the JWT, the access token. We'll see the supplier group and notice that the supplier is not authorized to update the product price. So you see access denied, and then the chatbot is saying, I'm sorry, you got an access denied error. Flipping back over to Apigee, you'll see that's where that happened. Right here, we did the call out to the external service, and then we have the access denied happening right there in Apigee. Okay, so what does it look like if I sign out? So I would like to, at this point, log out as Wilma. So I'm no longer going to be, that access token is now invalid. I'm going to go back to my my client and say MCP auth products again. And we're going to sign in differently this time. Rather than signing in as Wilma, I'm going to sign in as Dino. And I'm going to say, yes, allow that. Once again, I'm going to look at the status. And now it says, okay, you're signed in as Dino. Here's your information. And there is your group list. And you'll notice supplier is missing, staff is present. So now we should expect to see Apigee rendering a different access control decision. So again, let's try the same prompt. I'd like you to try again. And Gemini CLI is going to invoke that same tool, update product price, but this time it succeeds. Why does it succeed? Because I've signed in to a different user. So this is really awesome. We get Apigee, and you can see that's been approved. That call has gone through, and we're able to, update the product price. We did the verification of the JWT. We did the access control check. It passed, and so we're propagating that to the upstream MCP server. The MCP server in this case doesn't need to know anything about JWTs or access control, doesn't have any of that embedded. The developer of that MCP server just needs to focus on doing what it needs to do, implementing the service. And we've separated the concern of authentication and authorization to that middle tier Apigee layer really effectively. And anytime I want to change the access rules, I can just add or modify rows here, and Apigee will update this. Now, is it necessary to use a Google Sheet? No, it's not. You can use any data store. You could use something like Open Policy Agent. That would be fine as well. If you're comfortable with Rego and OPA, that works great as well as a way to store the access control decisions. But the key point is that Apigee can plug into that and then act as the enforcement point for those decisions. Okay, so I hope this has been instructive. I hope this has clarified the kinds of things that you can do with an existing Apigee gateway in the world of AI and MCP. I want to point out that MCP is really interesting and is going to be a key part of any AI strategy, but it's not the only API. You've got lots of different APIs in your environment, some of which are REST. You probably have SOAP, some of your APIs are being provided by not custom bespoke systems that you're building, but things that you're buying. And it would be really nice to have a single common gateway that can apply the right governance regardless of the API flavor and type and pedigree that you have in your upstream systems. Apigee can act as that single universal API gateway for the AI epoch and beyond. So I hope this has been helpful. Till next time, keep it digital.